Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to our Wednesday night live stream. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy C.J. Vogel, and the man who needs no introduction, the newest member of the On Texas football family, and my good friend, and now I call him a co-worker as well, the one and only Jeff Howe. Joining us for this Wednesday night live stream. So we got a good crew. We got a lot to get into as well. We got to talk about the latest reports about the Texas running back coach vacancy. We'll get into that coming up a little bit later on. Daniel Jeremiah has a mock draft, came out a couple of days ago. I think it came out yesterday, actually. We'll get into that Daniel Jeremiah mock draft, see where the Longhorns are slotted. Pro Football Folks has a big board that came out about a couple of days ago. I want to talk about their big board and where the Longhorns are on their big board as well. Jeff Howe had a great article over at ontexasfootball.com talking about this red shirt class that we just had. So I want to get into that a little bit and talk about that red shirt class. We won't give up all the details of Jeff's great work there, but I want to get into a discussion about that. We'll also take, of course, your questions, your comments, whatever you guys want to talk about. You guys drive the show in whatever direction you want to go in. Super chats, jump to the front of the line. You can interrupt the show at any time. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we appreciate all of your participation in the show as well. So let's get right to it, gentlemen. Report came down earlier today. Yeah, no hat. I know, I got a haircut. I don't get a lot of haircuts, and when I get a haircut, you know, the very rare time it happens, I should show it off a little bit. So, boom, there you go. That's why I'm not wearing it. I got the hat right here. Got it ready to go. Boom. No gas, no brakes. Got that ready to go, but it's rare. I know. I'm shocked some of y'all are like, what the hell? It's like, it's off-putting to see me without a hat on. I know. As I get older, I feel like I should, you know, I should get more haircuts and wear fewer hats as I get older. I don't know why I feel like that. Is that just
I'm in the same boat, Rod. I feel like I've got to just ditch the hat every day, but no. It's 4 degrees outside. I'm not stepping outside to go get a haircut anytime soon. So we're still rocking the hat.
It's practical. I'm just talking about, like, literally, I got a lid for every day. Like, I got a bunch of them. And I do wonder as I get older, as I approach my 50s, and I got to start, you know, wearing hats less. I'm 45 now, 44. Damn, that hurts to even say. Like, it hurt my feelings saying it out loud. I haven't said it out loud, and I got to admit, I shouldn't have said it out loud. It hurt my confidence as I said it out loud.
Yeah, my wife and I have been married almost 17 years, and I've been my own barber pretty much for the duration of that time. So saved a lot of money that way.
Yeah, no, me too. No, that's how I know I'm not cool anymore. CJ, don't listen to this because you're still cool and you're in your 20s. So don't listen to me and Jeff. But what I knew that because my dad used to cut his own hair, and I was like, man, why are you cutting your own hair? And I got to the point I was like, you know what? It makes the most sense. And I started cutting unless I had an event to do or something special. I'm going on TV. It's like, man, I'm cutting my own hair. And so Jeff's right. That's like losing your cool factor there. I lost my cool. You can't be cutting your own hair and be cool. It's tough to do that. Tough.
Yeah, I was driving my wife's car. This was a while back, and I've got, you know, my music going. I've got some Tupac. I'm going through All Eyes on Me, and I'm going along, and then I realized, like, you know, I'm in my wife's car with like the mama stickers in the back window, and I look at the booster seat. I'm like, it's over, Jeff. It's done. It's over. Just throw in the towel. You're done.
That is a great point. You can't get the same mindset you used to. Oh, man, that was a good one. That's true. I felt that feeling before myself, Jeff. I'm with you on that. All right. Enough of us moping about Father Time being undefeated. Let's get to the latest news in the Texas running back coach vacancy there. It was actually reported, and you've done some great work on this too, CJ, about some of the names that have been at least some of the top candidates being considered for that vacancy. But Matt Zenitz reported that West Virginia recently, a couple hours ago, that West Virginia's Chad Scott has emerged as a leading candidate for the running backs coach opening at Texas. This was sources tell CBS Sports. They said he's worked at West Virginia since 2019, including West Virginia's offensive coordinator in 2023 and 24 under Neil Brown, and helped West Virginia rank in the top 10 among Power 4 teams in rushing each of the last 2 seasons. So I thank you very much for that. Appreciate that, Matthew. I don't know. I haven't done a ton of research about Chad Scott. CJ, your thoughts? You actually did a great job coming up with earlier this week with some of the leading candidates for this vacancy. What are your thoughts about this latest report about West Virginia's Chad Scott?
Yeah, it's a name I would say not many Texas fans are familiar with, but you do the research and it's a pretty viable candidate, right? And that's kind of how Sarkisian operates is he kind of goes out and finds guys that you're not aware of, and then you do some digging, you go through the background, and you say, oh, you kind of surprise yourself with each leaf that you unturn. And Chad Scott's no different, right? Right. You mentioned he's been at West Virginia since 2019. He spent 3 years as the running backs coach. In between there, got a bump to co-offensive coordinator. 2022, he was the run game coordinator as well. And in these last 2 seasons, he was the offensive coordinator and actually, I believe, interim head coach towards the end of that. So really impressive kind of stance with West Virginia there. Of course, plenty of history as well with Louisville, North Carolina, Kentucky, Texas Tech. So he's well-traveled. He knows how to recruit. A lot of his territory actually included that deep South, Florida, Georgia areas as well, which is kind of one of those prereqs that we've been talking about since this job had opened up with Tashard Choice's departure. But hey, West Virginia's had pretty solid running games with Neil Brown. That's kind of been there's been a bright spot with Neil Brown. It's been some of those running games, right? When you talk about Letty Brown, when you talk about CJ Donaldson, who's now at Ohio State. So some impressive running backs. Of course, his resume and recruiting territories, I would say, check some boxes. I'm not yet ready to say the job is his. I know the tweet says that Chad Scott is going to be the leading candidate, and that might be the case. But look, we're still hearing some about Norval McKenzie, Keenan Hall at Baylor. He's kind of faded out a little bit based off of what I've heard recently. And, of course, E.J. Barthel over at Nebraska as well. So we're continuing to monitor, those 4 names essentially. But this certainly gives you a little bit more of a point in the direction of where Sarkisian might be headed. And I would say this is a really solid pick if this is the candidate that gets the job.
Yeah. One thing I like about Chad Scott is, Neil Brown was one of those guys no longer in the Big 12 because he was fired at West Virginia, but talk about the hybrid spread culture that was kind of taking over the Big 12 towards the end of Texas time in the conference. Neil Brown was the forefront of that. He likes using multiple tight ends. He'll use a fullback. He'll have a guy is in that sniffer position, and they'll try to run the football. So I went way down the road, right? I went way down the rabbit hole and, kind of spiraled a little bit, just kind of, ruminating thoughts on this. I'm thinking, man, if Chad Scott is the hire, because you got to think Chad Scott's been with Neil Brown. He was with him at Troy. Mm-hmm. He was with him at Texas Tech. He was with him at Kentucky and was with him at West Virginia. Army wonders if Sark hires Chad Scott if Neil Brown doesn't come along as an analyst, because Neil Brown doesn't need to work in 2025 because he's still getting paid by West Virginia. So wouldn't be a bad move, especially as you're looking to evolve the run game. And we talk about hybrid spreads, Neil Brown got mixed results at West Virginia, but you've got Jason McIndoe coming over from Oklahoma State. You look at those 2 offenses, there were no 2 offenses that fit the hybrid spread more than West Virginia and Oklahoma State in the Big 12. So as Sark looks to kind of evolve the offense, and you've got guys like Jordan Washington and Nick Townsend and different running backs, again, that's me putting the cart way in front of the horse on this deal, but that's where my mind started going.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm glad you brought that up because, look, we've talked about coordinators at other spots taking these position jobs at bigger programs, right? It was Chip Kelly just last year who said, no, I don't want to be a head coach. Let me go be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Not necessarily apples to apples here, but Johnny Nansen had a coordinator position at Arizona. That was his job to come work hand in hand with PK. Well, this is very much the same. And I went through the last 2 years of West Virginia and their offense in terms of where they stacked up in the country in terms of rush attempts per game. Because to your point, Jeff, that's kind of been Neil Brown's MO offensively is ground and pound. You got Garrett Green, but he's more of a luxury. You don't really want to air the ball out in this offense in this conference with the way that the 3 high has been implemented throughout. So let's, use this offensive line and this running game to really get going. 2023, West Virginia had 43 rush attempts per game. That was the 8th most in the entire country. This past year, West Virginia, 41.4. That was good for 13th in the country. Of course, those are both number 1 and number 2 in the Big 12 in each respective year. So they like to run the ball, and a lot of that is a result of Chad Scott and what he was able to implement in that running game as the play caller there. So, a guy with a very strong saying in that play calling room as well. So that's something I think should be looked at and monitored in terms of how much say he might have in the terms of just, hey, finding a brand new scheme for Sarkisian to adopt rather than forcing the offensive line's hands or what that run game might become more multiple in the rushing attack, really.
No, you need more diversity in the run game. We've talked about it, right? It's nice to have your bread and butter concepts, your staples in the run game, but you have to be able to pivot to something else when your bread and butter concepts aren't necessarily being productive or effective. And Texas couldn't do that this year when the outside zone wasn't working. So I love what you guys brought up. I love your suggestion, Jeff, about bringing on Neil Brown as an analyst if he's not doing anything. I think that's a great idea to add another, kind of run game mentality and add another innovative mind to the coaching staff to help bring some diversity to the run game. I think it's important. Yeah. They've had former coaches on the staff before. You had GP, you had Paul Christ. I like that idea, Jeff. That's a great one.
Yeah, especially I think we need to keep in mind too. I'm not asking Neil Brown to run my program. I'm asking him to help me with my run game, which nobody should have a problem with that. Again, putting the cart way in front of the horse. But Neil Brown or not, Chad Scott was the co-OC his entire time, and he was the OC. He had the OC title, I think, his last 2 years at West Virginia. So I mean, he'll be able to bring enough ideas to the table. The other thing, and this kind of goes more to CJ's foray with recruiting, talking about a guy that is from the state of Florida. He's from Plant City. So he's from and recruited that I-4 corridor from Tampa, St. Pete, all the way up through Lakeland to Orlando and then up to Daytona Beach. So that's a really key area. Losing to Tashard Choice, we talk about it in Georgia, but you also need to make sure you're good in the state of Florida. Texas isn't going to stop recruiting Florida. So that's another big deal. So there's a lot to like about a Chad Scott hire. I know sometimes when we start running down the resumes of the coaching candidates, I think we can get, and I just did it about Neil Brown with the analyst thing, we can get, way far off the tracks and, thinking, okay, this is a done deal and this is a great hire. But no, we talk about checking boxes, right? Nobody's going to check the amount of boxes that Tashard Choice checked, but Chad Scott checks a lot of boxes. Norval McKenzie checks a lot of boxes. EJ Barthel checks a lot of boxes. So I kind of like how this search is seems like it's narrowing down a little bit. And I'll say this about Chad Scott too. The reason why we should probably really dig into him. This is typically how Sark hires work. Us in the media, we chase our tails for a few days or a couple weeks, and then like 48 to 24 hours before something gets announced, that's when we usually hear the candidate's name emerge. So that's probably, I don't know for sure if that's how this is going to go, but it seems like if it follows the pattern, then I would not be surprised if Chad Scott's the next running backs coach at Texas.
Yep. And it's usually not the splash hires, the big names that, you bring up for the week that we're all hypothesizing about who's going to be the next coach. And then Sark makes a really sound hire. Hasn't always worked out that way, but most of the time it has. And Chad Scott sounds like he'd be a sound hire if indeed he's a leading candidate, as Matt Zenitz put it. All right, we'll get back to that conversation. And by the way, thank you to Juan, shout out. Thank you for the super chat. Juan said, okay, guys, what do you think of Chad Scott? Jeff and CJ both went down the resume there and gave you their thoughts. So thank you, Juan, for the super chat. I meant to throw that out there before, but we really appreciate it. We also appreciate Dr. Brett Robin. That's right, lifetime Longhorn Dr. Brett Robin. Special thanks to Dr. Brett Robin at the Austin Orthopedic Institute for sponsoring on Texas football and sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream. Dr. Robin, a former Longhorn running back, a lifetime Longhorn, my former teammate, so I can vouch for the man's integrity. He knows what it takes to stay in the game, and he's here for athletes of all ages, specializing in musculoskeletal health. Dr. Robin treats joint pain and injuries with a conservative approach first, but also offers advanced surgical options, including arthroscopic procedures, fracture management, and total joint replacements if necessary. With convenient offices in Austin, Georgetown, and Killeen, Dr. Robin is accepting new patients right now. If you're looking for a top-notch orthopedic specialist, give Dr. Robin a call, 512-856-1000. That's 512-856-1000, and get back to your active lifestyle and doing what you love. Thank you very much to Dr. Red Robin. Actually, I need to reach out to Dr. Red Robin too. Got some issues from my playing days coming back. And so thank you, Dr. Red Robin, your orthopedic specialist. All right, let's get to a couple of questions here. And then I want to get to that Daniel Jeremiah mock draft. We'll get to that. But first, get some of the questions. Cisco with a question here. What are your expectations for Jalen Gilbo? That's a, you know what, if he's going to be playing the nickel or, playing, that slot corner position, I mean, to me, usually the guy that can play that position at a high level. And did he play at a high level this year? I think he actually had a very, I don't know. I think it was an average year for him at the nickel position. I don't think it was exceptional. I do think it was average to maybe slightly above average. I don't think he was a liability there, like all season long. There were some situations, all right, where he was a liability in coverage, and that was exposed as you got to play better quarterbacks. But I don't think all season long, like, he was a weak spot or a liability. I expect him to take a huge leap this year. Usually guys that can play that position at Texas have been guys with an NFL skill set, a Sunday skill set. Usually that has been the case, the history of it. Is Jalen Gilbo that guy? I think that remains to be seen what kind of leap he takes this year. There are some people that believe maybe because they do cross-train these guys, that maybe they can think about moving him outside to corner. And, maybe if things don't work out at nickel, maybe you can find somebody else you'd rather play at the nickel. I think you're trying to get your best five out there. I think Jalen Gilbo is going to be a part of your best five. And honestly, I expect him to take a big leap this year. And I expect him, honestly, to be playing the nickel right now. He could go to corner and make a Jahdae Barron type transition. Right now, Jahdae had already mastered nickel when he went to corner, in my opinion. I don't think Jalen Gilbo has mastered the nickel position. So I still think of him as a guy that can be an asset for you on the back end. I do think last year was just an average year for him, but like I said, I'm not saying he was a liability or a weakness. But he has not, I don't necessarily think he was a playmaker for you in the secondary last season. I think that's the step he's got to make. Jahdae Barron at nickel was a playmaker, like every game.
Rod, to that point, I want to see him more in the passing game. And I don't know, obviously, never having played the nickel spot before, how is it easy to just flip a switch and become a threat in the passing game as well? Because I do feel like at times Jalen Gilbo is better going forward, right? He's great off the edge as a blitzer, delayed blitz. I think there are times where he's really good in terms of busting some screens or quick game behind or near the line of scrimmage. But in terms of when being picked on, is that just something you have in one-on-one man coverage, or when Texas goes zone at that middle of the field? That's where I want to see him improve. Is that something that you can just kind of flip a switch and get really good at in an offseason? Or is it, because for Jahdae, we saw all of that. We saw him get picked on towards the end of that year as well in 2023 against Oklahoma State. Washington, tested him pretty often. But when you moved out the corner, look, he only allowed one reception for 8 yards in man-to-man coverage as an outside corner. I know they didn't play man all that often, but is that a tough thing to just, all right, I know I got to focus on what's in front of me, but also in the route concepts, let me just kind of change who I am as a complete cornerback.
Yeah, it just, like I said, I would have to go back and watch film on Jalen Gilbo, right, to confirm this, but just eye test right now. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what his progressions are in zone coverage. Because that's important at nickel. It's easier at corner. Because really, most of the time, I'm looking at the quarterback. I can, if I'm in zone, I make key number two. Number two still goes vertical. I come back number one. I carry, stay over the top. It's an easier progression. I always talk about the progression reads of quarterbacks. DBs have one too in coverage. If I'm in zone, I'm usually looking at the number two receiver. I go from number two to number one. Some guys go from number two to the quarterback back to number one. And I wonder for Gilbo at times with the nickel, what his progression is and where his keys are, and then what actual, in terms of like him being organized. I don't know exactly what they're being taught, but in what sequence he's actually looking at his keys. I think he got in trouble with that a few times against good quarterbacks later on in the season. And there were times where his eyes were in the wrong place. And I think in the Clemson game, that might have been one of the games where he was probably mostly exposed against really good receivers and against a really good quarterback. So I think his eyes at nickel, your eyes got to be quick. Like you got to know exactly what your keys are because everything happens faster at nickel. Everything at corner, you got a little bit of time, things to develop. You got like a half a second more, maybe even a second more, and things play out a little bit slower. At nickel, I talked to Quandre Diggs about this. I played nickel. There is really no time for you to think it through. It's mostly instinct, reaction, and it's muscle memory from there. Which means your keys, what you're reading, you got to be on point. If your key is tight end or tight end to the QB and then back to the number 2, I need you to be quick and disciplined about and getting there, right? And what your keys are in that zone coverage because they play a lot of zone, but it's match zone, and which means you're going to match the guy in your zone aggressively and then play man to man. But at the nickel, it can be different. Sometimes underneath, they can match over the top and be underneath passing some of those routes off to another guy. So for him, I think it's all about his eyes and what's your progression, right? And what's the sequence that you're going from, the number 1 read to the number 2 read to the number 3 read, A, B to C to D. I think sometimes either he's slow doing it or he skips one of the steps and it gets him in trouble.
Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
My bad. When I think of a good nickel, there's a lot of things you can think of, but I think one of the things, the prerequisites is you got to have really good instincts to be a nickel. And I'll put it to you as simple as I can. Texas has had 3 Jim Thorpe Award winners, right? Jahdae Barron, Aaron Ross, Michael Huff. They've had 3 other guys be finalists. Of those 6, pretty sure the only 2 that didn't spend some time in the nickel were Quentin Jammer and Deshaun Elliott. Everybody else, Huff, Ross, Jahdae, Earl Thomas, those guys all either played primarily or at least early in their career played some nickel. And all those guys, what they have in common, they're ball hawks, they're instinctive, they're smart. And I think, Rod, you're on top of it exactly. I'm not telling you anything you don't know about defensive back play, is because I feel like at corner, you can tell me if I'm off, I feel like at corner, you can cancel out routes quicker because you've got the sideline as your extra defender, especially if you're playing into the boundary. If you're at the nickel, everything is a 2-way go. So not only do you have to think faster, but like you said, everything happens faster. You have to be you have to have elite instincts and be an elite processor to play in the nickel. That's why look at all the guys at Texas that have done it. I'm just talking about recently. Start with Kenny Vaccaro. Kenny Vaccaro played a long time in the league. Quandre has been a Pro Bowl guy. Duke Thomas made a team as an undrafted free agent. PJ Locke is still in the league. So, Brandon Jones played some nickel. He's still in the league. You're typically your highest football IQ guy, more often than not, is going to either been your nickel one year. He'll have been there. Even if he doesn't end his career there, he'll have spent some time in the nickel because you got to have somebody like that there.
Yeah, and I see some people saying, said Earl played straight safety, redshirt freshman, and safety sophomore year. Yeah, but I talked to Coach Akina, and Coach Akina told me that he was in practicing at nickel, and he was considering him to play nickel. He just took off on such a, meteoric, ascent when he played safety. He was like, nah, there's no need to even consider that. He's a safety. But because of what Jeff's talking about is the skill set. He had the instincts. And that's what Coach Akina was looking at and saying, yeah, I think I can look at him and play a nickel because he's got the instincts and he's got that Sunday skill set, that all-around skill set. Because you really can't have a tragic flaw in your skill set either at nickel. You got a tragic flaw in your skill set, it's going to get exposed there because you got to do so much. You got to get in on run support. You got to learn how to play zone. You got to learn how to play man. You got to learn how to cover guys and defend guys with a 2-way go. Sometimes I got to be a blitzer. So it's not that I'm elite at necessarily one or two things. It would help to be that, but you can't have a tragic flaw. And that's one thing about the nickel too. You got to find somebody with all around that 5'2" DB. Who's your best 5'2" D? That's why oftentimes, like you're saying, Jeff, that guy spent some time at nickel, that 5'2" DB. You know what I mean? Hell, Michael Taft spent some time. Michael Taft basically played every position in secondary. He spent some time at nickel when he got on the field early in his career.
Yeah, you could have Earl Thomas cover slot receivers, and you got to think about the slot receivers in the Big 12 at that time. It's Ryan Broyles, it's Kendall Wright, it's all those cats Oklahoma State had running through there at the time. All the guys Texas Tech had running through there. So yeah, Earl was a safety, but yeah, you could. If teams spread you out, Coach Keenan had no compunction about, I'll line him up and have him cover somebody's slot receiver. It's typically, Rod, you know this, if you remember, CJ, I don't know how far back you go in terms of watching Texas football and the Big 12, but there was a time, right around the time Earl Thomas was at Texas, it seemed like everybody was putting their best receiver in the slot because coaches just magically discovered, hey, if I give my best receiver a two-way go, he's that much harder to cover. I mean, go back and watch the 2008 Texas-Oklahoma game. All that damage Jordan Shipley did, it was from the slot. He played primarily slot that game.
Yeah. It was no, I'm with you. I don't know why they didn't do it. Mike Leach probably perfected it early on more than anybody else. And he didn't put elite wide receivers there. He was just he had a certain, guy he was going to weaponize putting in the slot. And I'm not sure who started in the Big 12 saying, you know what, let's just put our best receiver in the slot first.
You could
Texas was ready for it, though. Texas, the reason Coach Akina decided I want all guys that can cover on the field is because of Mike Leach and his air raid and putting all those shifty and going to 10 personnel, shifty wide receivers in the slot. And you needed guys that can cover in the slot, not some big safety or some linebacker. And ultimately, so your safeties had to be able to cover. And then you ultimately end up with guys like Michael Huff and Mike Griff playing safety those guys. Mike Griff went to the league and played corner when he got to the league, though. Y'all realize that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He went to the NFL and they drafted him as a safety and played corner his first year in the league. Because I think it was a Pac-Man Jones issue. Remember, he got in that draft and he played corner his first year. And he was like, nah, he's probably a better safety. That's how freaky the versatility was for Texas during that time period.
Another guy that could have been a nickel guy all the way. You just didn't really need to use him there. Mike Leach might as well have called his slot receiver the Belichick position because from between Wes Welker and Danny Amendola, those guys ate the Big 12 alive.
I remember. Don't remind me. I remember that.
I was going to say, Rod, I didn't want to bring it up.
I don't know. Like, I haven't looked at Wes Welker's stats from college, but it might have been his best game he ever had was against us, that 0-2 upset. It might have been. And someone says all Earl had to do was push Crabtree out of bounds.
Oh, come on.
Hey, listen, I always say y'all are really, thank you, Leo, for bringing it up, really hard on Blake Gideon for dropping the interception in that game. The Muschamp called the perfect defense on Michael Crabtree. He put 2 NFL DBs on him to bracket him, and neither one of them pushed him out of bounds. And nobody gives those guys any grief about it. I'm like, that's, to me as a DB, that was the unforgivable play. Like, come on, man. Just push him out of bounds. But those guys are great players, so it is what it is. Earl said he heard a whistle, is what CB said. Oh, he probably did. It's Tech. You in Lubbock. Of course you heard a whistle. You probably threw a tortilla at your head, too. It's Tech. Yeah. Hey, man, you got to play past the whistle when you go down there in Lubbock, man. It's wild. All right. Thank you, Cisco, for the question. That got us down a rabbit hole. We appreciate it. Shivam says, hey, guys, what will be the starting O-line group for this season after all the departures? We just did a position preview about this, CJ, about the O-line. What are your thoughts? Your starting O-line right now, if you had to speak on it.
Yeah, until spring ball comes around, I'm going to continue to kind of trot out that same projection of Trevor Gooseby at left tackle, Nato Umeozulu at left guard. You're going to have Cole Hudson at center, DJ Campbell, the lone true starter from a year ago at right guard, and then Brandon Baker at right tackle. So that's kind of where we're sitting. I know we all talked about it. That's 2 starts, 0, 13, 30, and 0 when you go left to right across the board. So a pretty fresh group, but a pretty old group, Jeff. And I think you made a comment on that. Really the only second-year guy or guy without 3 years of college experience at some degree is going to be Brandon Baker at right tackle, the 5-star at a modern day. So if that's the weak link is a 5-star right tackle, I don't think you're looking at a bad group. Of course, he had a full year to kind of step in and understand the day-to-day of college football as well. So I think that's what we're going to be working with until spring football comes rolling around. And you'll get to see some sort of battles at really each position, sans maybe right guard and left tackle at the moment.
Yeah, with Baker, the thing I like about him, you were able to get him some experience. He ends up playing in 7 games, but he only played in 4 during the regular season. So he still preserves a redshirt year because if you remember, Rod, you referenced that piece that I wrote on redshirt freshman today at OTF. I had to go back and double check because the NCAA made it to where the 2024 season was the first where only regular season games count against somebody's 4 games. Conference championships, bowl games, and college football playoff games don't count. So that's why Brandon Baker was able to get some extra time. And that's why if you're a CFP team, it really benefits you if you want to get a guy in there, put him on a field goal team or whatever. Hey, he can get his feet wet a little bit on special teams, and it's not costing us anything in terms of his eligibility. Now, I wish they'd have been able to do that with Jordan Washington and Xavier Filsaime and a couple other guys, but I digress. But, the intriguing thing about this line to me is, and I know, look, you'll never have a true 2 deep, but I think there's a better chance to be truly 2 deep on the line than some people think because your number 2 group right now, CJ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my best shot at the number 2 group would probably be Jaden Chapman at left tackle, Nick Brooks, the true freshman, at left guard, probably at this point Connor Robertson at center, Nate Kibble at right guard, and Andre Kojo at right tackle. You got a pretty good chance to be truly 2 deep. And when we start talking about position battles for spring ball, don't completely discount right tackle because I think Kyle Flood's going to give Andre Kojo a chance to go compete for that job. And I'm not saying he's going to beat Brandon Baker, or I'm not predicting anything, but right tackle could be one of those kind of sneaky under the radar position battles that probably aren't really thinking about right now.
Yeah, that's a good point about the depth. We just, you lost so much on the offensive line, but you're going to have a lot of talent. You talk your term, Jeff, talented depth. It's unproven largely, but it is a really talented group there. I'm really interested to see, but I like that starting lineup that CJQ's throwing out there too. I like that one. I think that's going to be the one. All right. Thank you, Shevin, for the question.
Hey, Rod, can we go ahead and break some news real quick? Just make it official.
Let's break it. Let's go ahead.
CJ's, I know, confirmed it a lot on Bobby and Jerry. Our OTF staff been working the phones. Chad Scott is expected to be named the next running backs coach at Texas.
Wow, done deal. All right.
So,
I see Bobby tweeted it out. I'm
glad I said what I did earlier because right after I said it is when all hell broke loose and this thing got confirmed. But yeah, I mean, typically in this how Sark's hires work, we all chase our tails, we get names, and then right before it breaks is when we find out who the guy is that we hadn't heard of to that point. So
no.
But
it's crazy.
For all the reasons we talked about earlier, there's just a lot to like about the Chad Scott hire. So, and I think too, something else, I don't remember who mentioned this in our staff text, but it's worth repeating because I've mentioned it. I don't know, Bobby's mentioned it. Jerry's talked about it. CJ, I think you even talked about it too. Sark, I think, prefers guys that aren't job hoppers, that are going to stick around for a minute. And you look at Chad Scott. I mean, he was at North Carolina for a few years. He was at West Virginia for, I think, 6 years. It was at Kentucky for, I think, 4 or 5 years. So he tends to not just look for the next big opportunity. And actually, just somebody mentioned it in the chat. He actually, with Rich Rodriguez coming back to West Virginia, Chad Scott was actually demoted. He was co-OC and running backs coach. He no longer has that co-OC title. So I don't think that's something that he needed to have to go to Texas. But yeah, this is, I think this is a pretty good hire for all the reasons that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and let's go through that just one more time, if y'all don't mind. I know we've picked up a couple hundred new viewers since then, but Chad Scott was at West Virginia from 2019 to this 2024 season. Of course, he was a running backs coach, had 2 years as the run game coordinator and then offensive coordinator from 23 to 24. He did not call plays. That was Neil Brown, of course, but we did see, and I mentioned it earlier, West Virginia was 13th and 8th when it comes to rushing attempts per game. Prior to West Virginia, Scott was at Louisville, North Carolina, and Kentucky. Texas Tech previously had a stint down there as well. So he's well-versed. He knows the state of Florida. C.J. Donaldson, one of the more notable backs that he's recruited now at Ohio State, comes out of Miami, Florida as well. Scott hails from the Sunshine State as well. So plenty of ties down there, plenty of ties to Georgia and, really those Carolinas, those Virginias in that area as well. So certainly where Sarkisian wanted to continue or recruiting prominence in that area, and a veteran guy with a lot of skin on the wall when it comes to development, production, and now that recruiting territory. When you piece it all together, you now have Chad Scott, the new Texas running backs coach for Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah. Now you said it, Jeff, and good job, because you did kind of call exactly how it would play out. But we talk about Tashard Choice checking a lot of boxes, and when you start doing research, and I gotta go watch some West Virginia film tonight and try to look at this running game a little bit. When you start looking at Chad Scott, you brought it up, he checks a lot of boxes. He does. He checks, CJ brought the developmental aspect. You can go into detail about it. You talked about recruiting and some of the ties he has there that can help Texas. And I love what you brought up about, your theory. I won't spoil it for those who haven't heard and just joined us about what else he could bring with him potentially to the Texas staff potentially.
Yeah, Chad Scott, he was with Neil Brown at Troy. He was with Neil Brown at Kentucky, at Texas Tech. He was with Neil Brown at Kentucky and West Virginia. So Neil Brown is getting paid by West Virginia to not coach football. Why not come hang? Hey, there are a lot worse places to be in the fall than Austin, Texas, right? If Neil Brown wants to just come down and be an analyst, be a consultant, whatever, even just come, give Sark some ideas, just get on the whiteboard for a little bit. I'm all for it, because as Sark looks to evolve, we talked about the need for the run game to have some diversity to it. And you look at what Neil Brown has been doing for a while now, and say what you want about him as a head coach, but you go back and watch his offenses at Troy, even his offenses at West Virginia. CJ, I'll let you get back to those numbers here in a minute that you mentioned earlier in the show, but he'll play with a fullback. He'll do some two-back stuff. They'll have all different kinds of tight ends. They'll have an inline guy. They'll have a sniffer move guy. They'll, not really the kind of what you think about the spread tight end, like the guy that you'd flex out. I mean, Neil Brown wants to play power football. It really is a hybrid spread offense, his offense. And I don't know that Sark will ever call his offense that, but when you hear Sark talk about, ideology and philosophy, it's kind of what it sounds like. As much as Sark values throwing the football to the running backs and wanting to play with a physical edge, Neil Brown and that Neil Brown offense can help you get there, whether he comes in or not. Though the fact that Chad Scott was the offensive coordinator, he's been a run game coordinator for Neil Brown, I feel like he can help you get there. Also, another and look, I know the end of Larry Fedora's tenure at North Carolina was nothing to write home about. And Rod, I think you and me during back then on the Blitz, I think that's where I kind of got disenchanted with the idea of analysts as game changers, because we spent a whole offseason talking about everything Larry Fedora could do, and nothing we talked about came to fruition. Now, he was working for Tom Herman, so maybe that had something to do with it. But Chad Scott worked for Larry Fedora also, who again is a spread you out to run it kind of guy. So I dig I just really dig this hire for a number of reasons. And CJ, I know you talked about the recruiting standpoint. That part of Florida, he's going to recruit. He's going to recruit all over. He can go down to South Florida and get guys, recruit all over the state. But a guy who's from Plant City that can help you make sure you're not missing anything in that I-4 corridor from Tampa to Lakeland, Orlando, up to Daytona Beach. I love having a guy that's familiar with that area, that knows where you need to go. He might know some high school coaches in that area. So I dig it. Between, some of the guys you've hired as support staff guys, along with Kenny Baker in Georgia, and now with Chad Scott in Florida, I feel like what Tashard Choice was doing, you just have two guys to do one guy's job now.
Yeah.
I
like that.
Another name that, I think is worth mentioning, right? We've mentioned C.J. Donaldson from Miami. Letty Brown's another one. And he's from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that's an area where we haven't seen a lot of Texas impact so far. Really just a lot of Coach Flood up in that Northeast. But, they got some good ball players up there. I'm not going to say that Texas is going to completely divert what they've been trying to implement in the South with Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, etc. But, hey, it's just one more, kind of docket that you could fill in on the state and say, okay, now you got another Northeast guy as well, another guy on the East Coast that you can sit there and say, this is no surprise. This is no coincidence that Jeff Banks was in the Carolinas extending five edge offers before the end of January. So Texas continually trying to grow their territorial map in the recruiting world. And Scott does just that for them, not just in Florida, but beyond on that East Coast.
And CJ, I like a guy especially for running back, kind of like Tashard Choice did. He can spot recruit running backs. You talk about Letty Brown being for Philly. DeAndre Swift is another one that was a Philly guy. So that area, Philly and Jersey, you can produce some. We've seen good running backs come out of that part of the country. But yeah, a guy that can spot recruit running backs. I do wonder, because we saw what Tashard Choice did, right? He would find him one elite guy nationally to kind of pursue, and one elite guy in state, and maybe not even an elite guy by recruiting industry standards, just a guy that he liked. Yeah. I wonder what kind of approach Chad Scott's going to take. He's coming to Texas at a really good time, though, because running back crop in state is really good. And even though it sounds like, I don't know if Texas can get back in it with Xavier Crowell, we'll see. But even nationally, you got enough kind of tugs on the line, if you will, from elite national backs. Texas should sign a really good 2 running back class in 26.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right about that. Some of the best players in the state, you look at like the top 15 to 20 to 26, a lot of them are running backs for the first time in a while. The running back position is making a comeback, guys. I don't know what the hell is going on. It really is. They're saying this running back draft is supposed to be one of the deepest running back drafts in history. They're comparing it to the 2017 running back draft, 2011 running back draft. And then I heard recently that Dan Jeremiah's got a lot of running backs in his mock draft, in his first round mock draft. And now we're talking about the crop of running backs in Texas is really good. I don't know, running back making a comeback, man. I like it. All right.
Here, can I throw a theory out, Rod?
Go ahead. Throw it out.
Especially if you're going to take a first round runner. If I'm going to pay, I don't mind paying first round money for a running back, because chances are if you give him that 5th year option, chances are you're going to pay him on that rookie contract for the best years of his career. So especially if I'm a Super Bowl contender and I feel like that's a piece I need, or that piece might elevate me another notch, yeah, I'll draft the first round runner and like I said, give him that 5th year option, and then I'll let him walk in free agency. I mean, we've seen plenty of teams do that, so I don't mind that at all. It makes sense. I think too. I heard Joel Klatt talk about this. Rod, we mentioned this a little bit on Football Theory. We got into the weeds with this a little bit. I think because so many teams, because of the sophisticated passes, are running 2 high and 3 high safeties. I think the counter to that is, instead of banging their heads against the OCs, banging their heads against the wall, it's like, look, we'll just run the ball downhill really hard and force them out of that 2 high shell, not so much wide zones or things that you want, but boom, just hit it up inside, hit it downhill, hit it fast. I think that's why you're seeing some of the run game, the revival of the run game, if you will, in college football. Yeah.
No, I'm with you. And I think at the NFL level too, I think it's all throughout football. I saw this. Dave Campbell's had their top 10 high school prospects in the state of Texas for 2026. They said for the first time ever, 4 running backs cracked the top 10. In there, so running. It's a good year for running backs in the state of Texas if you're recruiting, getting there. And a point you made, CJ, earlier about that area that they're recruiting, Philadelphia, that area. Penn State takes advantage of that better than anybody else. Penn State hits hard, that Philly area, that New Jersey, New York area, and Baltimore. Man, they kill it there. A lot of freakish athletes. That's where they're from. So I'm with you on that. If Texas can get a little share of that area, that wouldn't be a bad idea at all.
Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
Yeah, man. They got some freaks that come from those. That's like those 3 metro areas. That's kind of where Penn State focuses their attention.
I was doing some digging real quick. Sorry for the kind of extended absence. I know some folks were cheering, but look, running backs on roster at West Virginia, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, Florida, South Carolina, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. So that whole area that we just talked about, specifically down there in Florida and along that East Coast, that's where he brings you a recruiting edge. And I think, again, when you start looking at where Jeff Banks was, I think there's maybe a little bit of some seeds planted. Rod, we've talked about it in terms of Texas wanting to get more involved in Georgia and Florida. You want to have a mainstay there, but Texas getting to go on the road to Gainesville, getting to go on the road to Athens, that's where you really got to, I guess, kind of reap the rewards of what you sow beforehand if you go into either one of those campuses and win that game. Now that Texas has at least walked through the high schools, driven the roads, done whatever, just shown a logo in those states previously in January, and you have a guy that's recruited those areas beforehand, that makes things a whole lot easier moving forward.
Yeah, you said Ohio a couple of times too, didn't you? You said Ohio in there a few times.
Yeah, going back to the Midwest.
Yeah, Texas don't really have I don't know how many connections they really have up there. A lot of guys from that Midwest, but that's a ton of talent there. It's a great point. So maybe it is about getting some of the untapped resources for Texas in some of those fertile recruiting grounds. All right, before we get back
real quick, Rod, I just want to point out for a couple people in the chat, because I've seen somebody, hey, I think Jonathan mentioned, can we use Scott on defense against Ohio State? This is not the Chad Scott that was a corner for the Steelers and the Patriots back in the day.
Not that
different Chad Scott. And Jonathan, I'm not picking on you because I've seen a couple other people mention it, and I think they got corrected in the chat. But yeah, different Chad Scott.
Different Chad Scott. Trust me, hey, I thought about it too. Just so y'all, I was like, Chad Scott, I know was a DB for the Steelers, and yes, had to do some research there. Oh yeah, how about before we get back to things here? Someone says the last big time Ohio recruit we had, C. Gaddis / last big Ohio recruit was Jordan Hicks. Is that? Yeah. Is that true? Yeah, I think you know.
Yeah, but that was Jordan Hicks was kind of a technicality, right? Because the tie to Texas was his mom had worked at Colorado and was good friends with Jeff Madden, with Mad Dog. So plus Jordan, it depends on what part of Ohio you're talking about too. Like Jordan Hicks was from Cincinnati, which is, you stand in Cincinnati, spit across the river, and you're spitting into the state of Kentucky. So like it's kind of more south, and then you get kind of eastern Ohio, where a little bit more Rust Belt, get a little more rugged, kind of going towards the Pittsburgh area. And then, you talk about Columbus and, places like that. So, yeah, Ohio's a little bit, I don't know much about Ohio. I know it's a little bit different, but yeah, even Jordan Hicks, that wasn't like Texas just saw the best linebacker in the country in Ohio and decided to go get him. Because, Rod, you remember, like, if Mac was going to go out of state at the time to go get a guy, it's like, no, we need to do our homework on this guy. Does somebody know this kid? Does somebody know the family? Like, I don't want to waste my time if we, figure out, oh, this kid, the high school coach is on the take or something from somebody. But Jordan Hicks had an above board recruitment. It worked out for Texas. It worked out for Jordan. Still making money playing linebacker in the National Football League.
Okay.
Yeah. Going on like 10 years of it. All right. Let's thank our another sponsor, our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. Did you know the most awarded wine in Texas is actually the vineyard closest to Austin? That's right, folks. Flat Creek Estate Winery is just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Matter of fact, I know Super Texan is fantastic, not only because it's an award-winning wine, because I tasted it and I got some Super Texan in the house right now. It's fantastic. They have it at your local Specs. Also, they have a display at your local Central Market. I saw it there too. We do a lot of shopping, and the good word is getting out about Flat Creek Estate Winery. Not only do they produce some of the best premium wines on the market, but also they are a gorgeous venue with barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend. Perfect for a day date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with your significant other. That's flatcreekestate.com. Really appreciate them for sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream and being a part of the On Texas football family. That's flatcreekestate.com. All right, getting back to the super chat here. This is from Juan. Thank you, Juan. Another super chat. We appreciate it. Said, is Sark done hiring, or is he going to hire a Nichols coach? That is a great question. Jeff, what are your thoughts? Are we done with do we know what's going on in secondary? I should know some of this, and I gotta tell you, I'm a bit, flustered too. I have no idea exactly what they're gonna do in the secondary right now with the Nichols coach.
Yeah, because if Terry Joseph gets extended, right, we probably won't know about it unless he's just at Texas beyond the end of the month. Because if it's an expenditure under $1 million, it doesn't have to be approved by the Board of Regents, so it won't be in like a Regents meeting agenda that like Terry Joseph's contract is. Like if you look at the latest Regents meeting agenda, Sark's extension was in there, Vic Schaefer's extension was in there, extension for Jeff Banks, an extension for Johnny Nansen because of the dollar figure. So the Terry Joseph piece, until we get definitive word on that, which CJ, unless I missed something, we haven't. I'm not assuming Sark is done at this point.
I agree. And look, we've talked about it with the current status of the NCAA allowing, full-time and, staffers to be on the field, to coach, to help recruit. Look, we've talked about, Texas sending out some personnel guys to go recruit with the team preparing for the Cotton Bowl. The more guys that you're able to add to your staff who have had ties to different states, different, recruiting developments, whatnot, why not? And of course, the on-field product should improve as well with the more guys you're able to kind of, you know how you talk about classes when you're picking a school for your kid. I'm not there yet. I just hear about this, right? So you always want to compare it, like how many teachers per student they deal with. This is very much the same. How many guys can you look at in an individual position room and say, okay, we got another coach for you. He's going to implement the defense. He's going to get you through the calls, but he's going to get you into shape when it comes to his teaching, what he's done previously, and how it molds into the system. I always think that's interesting. And now that it's not capped at just 10 coaches on the field, well, it makes all the sense in the world to go out and add and get more voices, as long as there are not too many cooks in the kitchen, right? But I think it's a smart move to go out there and get, a position coach specific for corners, for nickels, for safeties, etc. You already saw Texas go out and get an outside linebackers class, coach. So I'm all for it.
Yep, and I think Orfe will be the cornerbacks coach.
I agree.
I think that's where he's going. I think he's gonna have a specific coach for every position. Maybe in one of them will be the coordinator of the entire secondary. But I think Orfe is there for the corners. What they're going to do at safeties and nickels, that's a great question. It doesn't seem like there's a urgency to do it. That's a weird thing. Either the Terry Joseph contract or you thought we would have heard about it by now. So we'll just kind of wait and see if there is some news on that front. But I agree with both Jeff and CJ. I do think they're going to hire another coach there specifically for the nickels. What happens with Terry Joseph? I don't think any of us actually know the answer to that question either. All right, thank you.
Can I throw a theory out there, Rob? I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but until, like I said, I can only speculate until we get definitive word on Terry Joseph. What if they just hire just straight up teachers, position coaches in the secondary, and Johnny Nansen gets the title of defensive pass game coordinator in addition to co-DC? Because he has coached defensive backs before, and he did so much. Rob, this is nothing. We got into this on Football Theory the last couple of weeks. He did so much last year to change and evolve the coverages of this defense, and I think we'll continue to evolve it. That's not, if Terry Joseph does move on or whatever, that's not the worst idea, I don't think. I think it's, as my high school defensive coordinator would say when I was sitting in English class, instead of reading Chaucer, I was drawing up blitzes and handing them to him for practice that afternoon. Well, that's crazy enough to work.
No, it's a good point about him influencing the coverage, because he has. They played more single high this year than they've played since PK's been here. I believe that's a Nansen influence. Played dime for the first time. They were on a team that had a dime package, had that. So you're right. He's influenced the coverages and also the personnel groupings. NASCAR, they've gotten more exotics on the defense. Like I said, that does sound kind of wild, but in a good way. Yeah, in a good way. I like that. All right. So Jeff, man, you got two good theories today. I like it. Like the Neil Brown one. And I like that one too. I like that one. That's good, man. That's good stuff.
I'm gonna have to go get my aluminum foil hat. At least set it down and
Exactly.
Go put that one on. I'm for it.
Get on that grassy knoll with my man Jeff Howe.
It's because I changed my the setup on my desk here. You can't see it, but I got my Rod Babers rookie card up on my desk, so I got Rod's football theory is with me at all times when I'm at the desk.
Hey man, that thing is depreciating in value by the day. You better. I don't know what the Rocky card is worth. I want to say that it might be worth like a nickel, maybe a nickel. It might be worth.
Hey, this is an uncirculated one from Bowman, sir. So give yourself more credit. You're sitting in between a Quinn Ewers 1/1 and a Bijan auto. So
you're nice. I appreciate that. Hey, that's disrespect to both of those great players, and I appreciate it. How about this one from Shivam? Another one. I like this question though. What are the realistic expectations for year one for Justice Terry?
Oh, I like this.
I would like to see him. I'll just say this, and I'll open up the floor to you guys. I just want to see him on the NASCAR package. That's it. I just want to make sure. I think he should be one of those guys on the NASCAR package. When you know it's 3rd and long, and you know they're gonna throw the football, put that freak out there and have him just pin his ears back and rush the passer. That's an easy way to transition, just like you did Colin Simmons. These front 7 freaks. It's an easy way to transition them into action at the next level.
Yeah, I think a bit of it also kind of depends on how large he gets over the next couple of months, right?
Okay.
You know, he's right around I believe 265 is what he came in as. If he's right around 270, 275, that fits for that edge spot. But does he get bigger than that, right? We've seen it with Colin Simmons. We've seen it with Ty Anthony Smith. I know that they're smaller frames, so it's easier to grow on them. But hey, if you're able to get to 285 in that NASCAR package, you're moved to the inside at times. You can throw them at a 2, at a 3, at a 5, at a 7 out wide, and then the opportunities are endless because we know how much of an athletic freak he is. And then you pair him up with a Colin Simmons, Trey Moore. You know, who of that interior bunch really stands out in these big time passing situations? Right now, I think it's a bit of an unknown unless you look at Alex January as, okay, you just can't come off the field in this situation. But I think that his weight, obviously with that size, the fluctuation allows for that versatility. But I'm looking at year one expectations. Find a role, and then, Rod, you mentioned that the NASCAR package. I think that's a great start. And once he gets on the field there, I think it's going to be really tough to keep him off the field consistently. But my goodness, when you have those level of freaks that I just mentioned, and then an Anthony Hill behind him, yeah, I'm sure Coach Flood is sitting there thinking, I'm glad these games, these practices, this fall camp, I'm glad none of that matters for me. I would hate to go against these guys in a real game where my job's on the line.
Seriously.
From a developmental standpoint, look, I hate the SEC 8-game schedule, and I'm glad that, as the SEC and the Big Ten take over the college football playoff, that the SEC is going to go to 9 games, which is great for us because it's just more quality football. But from a developmental standpoint, if you're Sark, you love the 8-game schedule because you get that extra non-conference game. Yes, you open with Ohio State, but then you've got 3 games. You got San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston all at home. That's a really good opportunity. It should be for you to get Justice Terry some snaps to figure out kind of where he might fit best. If I'm thinking maybe not, I know the question is about realistic expectations for this year, but I would just be kind of repeating what CJ and Rod said. My long-term outlook for Justice Terry to like a best case scenario, can he be Lamar Houston? Because if he can be Lamar Houston, then he's a top 2 round NFL pick. And I think because Lamar Houston was kind of the same way, he came to Texas as a bigger bodied athletic defensive end who kind of gradually got bigger and was probably right around 295, 300 by the time he got done at Texas, but was athletic enough. And this is the thing I don't know about Justice Terry, is he a Lamar Houston level athlete? Lamar Houston was athletic enough that he played outside backer in a 3. He played rush in for Vic Fangio in an odd front. So yeah, at 260 pounds. So I don't know if Justice Terry is that kind of athlete, but that's where I'm at, Rod. That would be my best case comp for Justice Terry is Lamar Houston.
I've heard he might be freakishly athletic like that, though. In terms of now, like, can the body fluctuate, you know what I mean, and gain 20, like she said, 30 pounds and still be able to do those kind of things? That's the question. But I got high expectations for him. I got pretty high expectations for him as a freshman. So I think they'll find a way to weaponize him on the field. All right, let's thank our friends over at South Point before we answer a couple of more questions, and we'll end tonight's live stream, and also we'll end it recapping the big news that broke today via our man Bobby Burton that Texas has a new running backs coach, or will have a new running backs coach. Hey, Texas football fans, you can score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point with our friends over at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including a great selection of Ram 1500s, 2500s, and 3500s. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is the one-stop shop. And right now is a great opportunity for you to head on over to our friends over at South Point Dodge and get a great deal on a Ram 2500. Right now, over 50 Ram 2500s are all marked down with huge savings over at South Point Dodge. So head on over there, whether it be you trying to resell your vehicle or trying to buy a new vehicle. Our friends at South Point Dodge are Austin's automotive everything. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is your one-stop shop. We appreciate SouthPointDodge.com for being a part of the On Texas football family and sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream at SouthPointDodge.com. Head on over there to South Austin off I-35, and you can go see their fantastic inventory in person, or you can go online, as I just encouraged you, at SouthPointDodge.com, and you can see their inventory there. Thank you very much for your sponsorship, and thank you to our friends at SouthPointDodge.com. All right, let's hit Todd Lacey's super chat here as we get to the end of our live stream. It says, what changes in all facets of the team do you see in order to push the 2025 Texas over the top and win it all? Thank you for the super chat, Todd Lacey. I think, number one, you literally have been on the goal line and in the red zone in the Final Four the last couple of years. So the red zone offense, goal line offense seem to be the two most obvious ones. You got to get better there, period. And, I think that's an easy place to start. What are you guys' thoughts about Todd's question?
I think it starts with that offensive line. And I know it's a new group. I know that there's some questions that might not have answers yet, but you look at where Texas really struggled whenever they lost football games last year was running the football, right? Even in some of those games that they won, couldn't consistently find a run game against Arkansas. You didn't have a great run game against Arizona State, yet you were able to win those games because you were a better team. But when you play Georgia's, Ohio State's, the Clemson, I know Texas pushed them around, but next year they're going to have a great defensive line in front seven. Are you able to find those 5, 6, 7 yards that create short distances and to stay above the chains? That was a big issue for Texas, and it was a very frustrating issue for Texas. And Rod, I know that we've talked about it throughout the entire season, and Jeff, I'm sure you were covering the same thing. When you can't consistently stay ahead of the chains, that puts a lot on your quarterback. Now, Texas will also have a more mobile, dual threat quarterback with Arch Manning in 2025, but that's a lot to ask of him to put the entire kind of pressure of that entire offense on his shoulders. To get some sort of consistent run game in every game that you play, it starts with that offensive line, and I think that it starts specifically with those guards. Nato, DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson at middle. Are you able to move guys? That's going to be big for me. That's the next step. You were just on the 1 yard line. You just mentioned it, Rod. That offensive line should have been able to get you into the end zone. I know Sark took it out of their hands with that toss sweep, but hey, you had a chance. Most good teams have a really good success rate when on the 1 yard line. So that's my 2 cents.
Yep.
For me, I've got to have Sark push all his chips to the middle of the table and do whatever he can to maximize Arch Manning. That means I got to make sure my vertical passing game is maximized, whether that's the 6-0 line package and some max protection. If I just change how I call a game, I got to make sure I call a game to what Arch does best. And look, there's a happy medium to be found that's safe for Arch between like Sark just not wanting to run the quarterback and the Urban Meyer offense where you want to run the quarterback 20 times and Sam Ehlinger running the ball upwards of 25, 30 times in a game. There's a happy medium somewhere in there. And I'm just asking Sark, just lean into it a little bit. You don't even do it all the time. But, hey, on a 3rd and 3 in Columbus to keep a drive going, probably going to need to let Arch make that read on that backside defensive end to see if it's a handoff or he pulls it and keeps it. So, CJ kind of led me there. But, yeah, I've got to – I don't – if I'm Sark – I would hate to have the same feeling Lincoln Riley had about Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, where you had two transcendent quarterbacks and you couldn't get over the hump to win a national championship because you couldn't maximize everything that guy brought to the table. And with Lincoln Riley, we know is Oklahoma had a putrid defense, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't want Sark. When you got a championship window with Arch Manning as your quarterback, we think go maximize it. Whatever you got to do philosophically, however you got to change, go make the change.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, good stuff, guys. I want to real quick, just for those who may have joined us late, Bobby Burton did report out there via Twitter that Texas is expected to hire Chad Scott, the West Virginia running backs coach, to be the next running backs coach at Texas. We did talk about it earlier, but guys, your kind of closing thoughts with the hire. Of course, we'll be talking about it and covering it at ontexasfootball.com and here on the On Texas Football YouTube channel. But closing thoughts about was it be the new hire for Texas at the running back coach position?
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I like it for recruiting. Again, you're hitting a critical area, the I-4 corridor in Florida, and Chad Scott can recruit all over Florida. And again, as CJ pointed out, he can get you in the Northeast, Philly, Jersey, New York metro area, tri-state area, even all the way down to DMV. So I like it for recruiting. I like the fact that he's had an OC title. The guys that he's worked for have been spread you out to run it guys with Larry Fedora and Neil Brown. And I see people mention it in the chat, and I don't know if he's thinking about entering the portal, but man, I wouldn't be too upset if Chad Scott's moved to Texas if Jaheim White didn't follow him out of Morgantown during that spring portal window, jump in and come to Texas. But yeah, again, you weren't going to find somebody that checked as many boxes as Tashard Choice, but Chad Scott checks a lot of those boxes that you needed the replacement to check.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's interesting. I'm with you, Jeff. And again, from a territorial recruiting impact, I think it's great. You knock out Florida, you got ties all the way up to Pennsylvania, Ohio, even, and of course Georgia, the Carolinas, West Virginia. You knock out a lot with this. There's also a history of development. I mentioned it earlier that he's had back-to-back seasons with 2 rushers over 750 yards. That's not too bad. Texas kind of had to scrape and claw to get Trey Wisner over 1,000 yards this year, but you're expecting to have a pretty solid deal of running backs on a given year with the way Texas has recruited and with the way that this room is already looking at the moment. So I'm excited for it. I think, again, Sarkisian, and when it comes to these open vacancies at position groups, you almost kind of just take everything that you hear early on and throw it away because it just doesn't mean anything other than just hearsay and, really just kind of guessing and predictions, because more times than not, the name that pops up the latest is the one that Sarkisian wants to roll with. And it's worked out at just about every position we've seen otherwise. So might as well empty slate, put all your chips in and see what Chad Scott can bring to the Texas Longhorns.
Yep. Great stuff, guys. Yeah, I love it. I think he checks recruiting, checks development, as you brought up, CJ, and checks a schematic, may bring a schematic advantage for you as well with some of his knowledge of the very diverse run game that West Virginia had over the last couple of years. All right, thanks, guys. We appreciate all of your input. Thanks, CJ, for all of the nuggets. Thank you, Jeff, for all the knowledge and the wisdom. We appreciate Matthew behind the scenes, of course. He's the real MVP. We couldn't have done it without him. Thank you to all of our sponsors as well. Thank you to Dr. Brett Robin. Thank you also to South Point Dodge, southpointdodge.com, and Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. If we missed any of your questions, I see Colt here. Colt Monroe with a super chat. Just threw it out there. Hey, you know what? We appreciate it, Colt. I don't know who actually approved that. So I'm not going to encourage it, but we appreciate it, Colt. We appreciate that love. No doubt about that. I want to show you.
Yeah. And a shout out to Rod's barber too for lining them up nice.
Hey, hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that, Jeff. See, my man Kev up, K Rock. Appreciate K Rock for chopping me up today too, getting me in. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for all the participation. Really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. If we missed any of your questions, we apologize. Direct them to please the guys at Coffee and Football tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We'll also have the winning drive tomorrow around 3:15 to around 4:30. That'll be CJ Vogel. Jeff's gonna step in for me. Also gonna be Coach Shipley on that one. So that'll be a good time as well. So CJ said CJ better come to one of my baseball games. Let's go. So yeah, you're on the line, CJ. You're on the hook, man.
Colt, you got to be doing some homework right now. I know it's a Wednesday. I know it's cold outside, but the rest of the week, you got to be at school. I'll be out there, Colt. I'll make a trip up. Colt, he's in the lineup that day.
He's going to throw his hat about halfway there. So
that's right.
I love that. Good stuff. Thank you to Colt, and thank you to each and every one of you out there for the super chats. We appreciate that. Also, all the questions. Thank you for your participation. For Jeff, for CJ, for Matthew behind the scenes. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Beavers, and until next time, hook 'em horns.
Go to class, Colt.